I'm going to talk about carbon because I think that's the crucial issue of our time and how it affects gardening. And of course, biochar is the purest form of carbon. So I'll sort of take you in some ways on the journey I've been on that took me into the world of biochar. I was born in Nebraska, in the middle of the United States, in the green part of that map, which was all virgin prairie until about 1870 or 1880. My great-great-grandfather started plowing it, and my grandfather continued, and the carbon content of that soil went from 100 tons per hectare to about now 5. If you looked at it on a Google map, it would have been black 100 years ago. It's now beige. All that carbon is now in our atmosphere. And half the carbon in our atmosphere, the greenhouse gases, nearly half of what we have increased since 1850, has come from that sort of farming. And the same thing has happened in the Ukraine, in the Harbin province of China, in the Punjab, in Argentina and Brazil. We've taken the carbon that has been building up in the soil over millennia and just blown it into the atmosphere with disastrous results. That area of the Mississippi Valley was covered in trees in the 1850s. The trees had to go to make way for plows and farming. The removal of the trees inevitably led to floods, and the Mississippi flooded in 1927. The water was 9 meters above the flood line, so it's 27 feet deep. That much water that never ran off the land before did, because there were no trees, there was no soil, there was nothing to hold it. And then a few years later there was drought, and that same rubbishy soil turned into dust and blew up into the atmosphere. And my mother had respiratory conditions all her life because of the amount of dust she inhaled during what was called the dirty 30s out there. And that scared people in Europe, and Lady Eve Balfour founded the Soil Association, named it the Soil Association to emphasize the importance of soil, and with the philosophy that if you had healthy soil, you would have healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy people, and that should combine to produce a healthy society. And they were laughed at for years. But a couple of years ago, a group of UN development, various ministries of agriculture, Monsanto, Syngenta, all got together and said, let's map out farming for the future. And they appointed 400 agronomists and agricultural experts, and it was called the International Assessment of Agricultural Science and Technology for Development. And they published their report, and 2 weeks before the report came out, Monsanto and Syngenta said, well, that's rubbish. We don't believe that. And we think those 400 experts got it wrong, even though we helped appoint them. Because it said, subsidies are causing all the trouble, where we have to put human health first above profit. We have to reflect that the Green Revolution has had unintended consequences. It produced a lot of food, but it's destroyed a lot of land. And genetic engineering is just a patch on the problem, not a solution. And we have to do it now and protect our soil. Support small farmers and reward farmers who prevent climate change. Well, who are those farmers? An industrial farm uses 12 calories of fossil fuel to produce 1 calorie of food. We're eating oil. An organic farmer is also using fossil fuels. It's not that much better, well, twice as good, 6 calories. A gardener or a person with a hoe, a farmer with a hoe, uses 1 calorie of energy to produce 20 calories of food. So when you produce food in an allotment or your garden, you're actually 120 times more efficient in carbon terms, in energy terms, than an organic farmer, and 240 times more efficient than an industrial farmer. Without dragging you through the figures, organic farms can sequester a ton of carbon. Properly managed, can actually put a ton of carbon into the soil every year, rebuilding soil carbon. A farmer with a hoe is going to do even more in terms of the total carbon balance. And if you actually put that into the cost of farming, it would make organic farming automatically, if you just price the carbon in, it would make an organic farm 350 euros per hectare better off if you rewarded farmers for carbon. And that's coming. The Paris talks in 2015 are going to be the climax of all these years of fruitless negotiation. But they're getting there. And by the time they go to Paris, China, with 8 carbon exchanges, California, Quebec, British Columbia, and all of Europe will have an interconnected carbon trading system that will value carbon and start pricing it into everything, including agriculture and transportation, which were left out after Kyoto. So that's potentially, we can reduce, if everybody went organic on the whole planet, we would be reducing instead of increasing our carbon emissions every year, even if we drove and burned just as much fossil fuel as we do now. So agriculture has cars can never sequester carbon, but agriculture can, farming can. So we need to change the way we farm to get to that 350 euros per hectare. Every year we're losing 125 million hectares of land. So we only have 110 years left, and that's assuming that the world's population can decline at that sort of rate as well, because obviously, less land does not mean more food.